Before I get started talking about this boat, I want to remind everybody that the Jamestown Distributors tent sale is this Saturday at their home office in Bristol, Rhode Island. Now, I'm going to be there with this boat seeking some advice, and there's all kinds of displays and all kinds of fun can be had, I'm sure. So I'll meet you there, I hope, and we'll talk about it, you know, because I'm in the process now of just getting started planking it. We've worked on the bottom. The bottom's been quite an episode, really. It really has, because I've worked with some material I've never worked with before. I came up with a system and everything that was just totally different that hasn't been done, I don't think, in a bottom like this. So, you know, it looks like wood from inside, and the boat's basically wood, but it has carbon fiber reinforcement and Kevlar on the bottom of it, and the only thing I do have left to do is where this overlap was, where I overlapped the 2 layers of cloth. I want to put one strip of what they call tape down the middle, which is a carbon fiber and Kevlar tape sewn on both edges, and I'll resin that right down the middle. That'll neaten that right up. And the next thing I want to talk about is this. This is one of the Broadstrakes right here. This is our first Broadstrake that we're going to fit in place. You remember I made a pattern of this plank right here, and then once I cut this plank out, I joined it to this one. I scuffed it together on the boat right here. So the plank does fit at the 2 ends and everything, and I've worked on the gains and worked on the fit, and I've got it to be exactly what I want. So I've got the angle cut for the next overlap already on it, or most of it. So I'm ready to continue fitting. So there's a few things about this plank that this boat's planked up fairly thick, and the planks are very difficult to get around this twist right here. You would have to either steam them or boil them or do something like that in order to get them to stay down. And rather than do that, what I've done is I pushed them through a bandsaw and resawed them up to about here. So they're in 2 layers up here, and then it goes into 1 layer right in here. So from here, it twists in there quite easy. You can just take one hand and twist it right in. So what I'm going to do actually is take and glue that up and fasten it down or clamp it down and let the glue go off. And then I'm going to take the plank back off and clean that up a little bit, and then bed it in place and fasten it down with screws. So that's kind of where I'm headed right now. And I've got the plank for the other side fit to basically this extent, except for maybe the gains a little bit. I need to do a little bit of work on those. But, you know, I'm ready to just start planking it, you know, and I've got behind me, look at this, a pile of planking to select from. So I'm going to sift through that a little bit and see if I can't pick out a few pieces so that I can continue on here. This is our other Broadstrake right here, and this is the forward end of it, and I'm going to do the same thing to this one that I did to the other one. I'm going to resaw it, which just means I'm going to put it in 2 layers. Instead of one piece like this, it's going to be in 2 layers. And believe me, what it's going to do is twist and bend twice as easy as it does in 1 layer. So I'm going to saw it right down to the first section in the mold right here, and I expect that it'll go right in place much more easily. This one I have actually bent in, and it does go in, but it's very difficult to get it to happen. Now, I could steam it, I suppose, or I could boil water and dump it all over it. I could do all kinds of things, and all kinds of things like that have been done numerous times. But also people have split the planks and had all kinds of different problems planking up dories, especially when they're not really used to it. So, and I'm not used to it at all. So, you know, what I want to do is make sure I have it come out right. And the easiest thing for me to do is limber it up. And we do work a lot with glues and all those things. So what I'm going to do is put glue in the 2 layers and bend it in place and glue it off. And the 2 layers will actually slide and move on each other a little bit. So once I take it off, it'll be much easier to get it back to that shape. Then I'll bed it down afterwards. So basically what I'm going to do is use that for like a mold to bend this thing up forward in place and glue it in place after I get it resawn. But I'm going to resaw it on my little bandsaw right here, and it's going to make some dust and some smoke, but I'll tell you what, it's going to do the job no problem at all. I've set up a fence and clamped it down to the table here, and I've got a little shim alongside of it too, a piece of wood clamped on there, and I've got that about maybe 5/16 away from the blade. So the fence is parallel in the blade, and I'm going to use the outside of the plank to slide along the fence. So basically what I'm going to have is one piece that's consistent in thickness and another piece that's a little bit tapered. The inside piece will be a little bit tapered, so that's okay. You know, I've tapered the whole plank anyhow, so I understand that. So, but it's going to be a nice little cut. The bandsaw cut's pretty nice. It's got a brand new blade in it. You can't push it too fast, and sometimes when you're sawing, you'll notice I back up a little tiny bit, and when you back up, it really knocks all of the dust out of the cut right there, and it enables the blade to cut a little bit better. It really steams along really nicely for a saw this size. And I've got a lot of experience with this saw because I've owned this thing for like 30 years, so we know what it can do. Now that I've been sawing down the middle, I feel much more limber than I did before. Before, when I tried to twist, I was stiff and I couldn't make it. Now I'm limber like this, and I can bend really easy. So, you know, it's it's actually kind of funny, but it's true. The plank does bend very easily like that, much more easily than it did before. And I've kind of made the boat have a blunt bow, so I want the boat to have planking bent a lot at the forward end of it like that. So the hood end is sometimes hard to keep in place if the plank is real thick. So this is going to work really nice. I'm kind of used to spreading glue, so we're going to open it up like that and spread glue all the way up there. Make sure we get it all the way to the end of the cut, you know, with some sort of a putty knife or something. And we'll get a good supply in there, and of course the two pieces match up perfectly because it's done with one saw cut, so you can't miss as far as getting a nice tight glue line. Glue it up on the boat and get that twist going in it, and we'll isolate it from the boat so that what we can do is remove it and then clean it up a little bit and then bed the plank back on afterwards. So that's kind of what we're up to next here. Now I'm going to put a couple of pieces of tape, one piece right in the gain, another piece kind of flapping over it, because I don't want to get any glue in between these two pieces. I don't want to glue this Broadstrake off to the boat. What I want to do is just glue up the cut that I put in the Broadstrake, but I don't want to glue it down. Just a quick note on the graduations on the mixing cups that we've been using here. Now, I've been mixing kind of my own way. I was using one side of the 2-to-1 scale. I'd fill it up to the 1 with a hardener and then put 2 parts of resin on the top of it, and that would be 2-to-1. It just happens that that works out with the proper way to do it, which would be to fill it up to the 1 with resin and then fill it up past that to the next one with hardener on top of that, and you would get 2-to-1 in that respect. And it works this way as well. You'd fill it up to the 2 with resin, and then you'd put hardener on top up to the next 2, and then you'd have the 3 or the 4s. So I was actually doing it the wrong way, but the way I was working with it, it worked out perfectly because the lines match right up perfectly, so we didn't make any mistakes. I even had tested some of these scales first because I was a little confused about how they work. I guess I never did come up with it, but here it is. This is the way they actually work. This time I'm going to put the resin in first. We're mixing up more TotalBoat High Performance 2-to-1 epoxy resin, and we're going to spread it in that resaw cut that I made in the forward end of the Broadstrake. Now, I'm just going to use a stick here, the same stick that I mixed it with, actually to spread it in there, because I need something long and kind of flat to get it up in there, especially where I'm finishing off that cut. I need to like put kind of a reservoir of glue in that kind of area right there, just just ahead of that, and then take the stick and push it back in there, and I'm just using a little bit of pressure. So I'm able to, the stick won't go all the way back in there, but I know that I'm pushing some glue back in there. So I got to get a generous supply on one side, and then I'm going to flip the thing over and put a generous supply on the other side. Now, thickening the glue right here would be a little bit of a pain because it'd be kind of hard to spread it out in there, so I decided not to even bother thickening it, because I know that, it fits perfectly. It's one bandsaw cut in between it. That bandsaw cut, I had a lot of confidence in that bandsaw cut because I know my bandsaw and I know how well it'll cut. This method right here works fine for me and would work fine for anybody that can make that cut, but making that cut's the trick to it. I'm going to pull the spreader out, the piece I've got in between, and just put the two pieces together and give it a little squeeze, and you can see some glue coming out of there. And now I'm ready to go right over to the boat and put it on the boat. You'll notice as I carry the plank into position, I've got a few pieces of wood clamped to the framing right here. And it's just so that when I lay the plank down, it just slides down against those blocks and it doesn't give me any trouble, because I have to position it fore and aft in the right spot, and then I'm going to work my way up forward. Now you can see that as I clamp it along, I'll put one clamp and it gets a little bit closer, and then I'll add another clamp and a little bit closer. But up forward, it takes a clamp right at the very bow end of it, right at the very top of the clamp itself, or the plank itself, in order to get that piece bent right in there. And it's quite something after it's all clamped up. When you look at the very end of the plank, that cut that I made up through there actually shuffled like 1/8 of an inch. So that's quite a bit of tension relief, actually, to get that curvature to it like that. And like I said, I wanted the boat to have a nice full end at the forward end, because it stops the boat from diving into the waves. And it helps it in a following sea, and it helps it when you're going towards the weather too. So, it's not a big boat. I wanted full ends on it, and they're a little bit difficult to make. So I knew I was in for it a little tiny bit. Like I said before, a lot of people would have steamed these or done different things, but we just chose this method. We've got the glue to work with, so there we go. Well, we're finally starting to get a few planks on the boat. We've got a couple of Broadstrakes cut. There's one of them on the boat right now, fastened or clamped into position, and we're going to let that forward end of it dry, where we glued the two layers of it together before we actually fasten it down. Tomorrow I'll take it off and clean that up a little bit with a plane and just make sure I pull the tape off there and different things. But tomorrow I'm going to bed that plank on, and that one will be in position and done, and I'm going to move on to the next one on the other side. But I'll have 3 more to go after that. It really isn't that big of a deal, and we're going to fasten them to our nice plastic frames as we go with screws, and it's going to be a pretty interesting situation. So see you at the tent sale.